Will Liverman as Bob and Nicole Cabell as Mary will be joined by Rahana Thelwell as Aunt Lou and Christian Mark Gibbs as Nate. The Stills first worked on this story in 1942, but it wasn't until 1961 when conductor Fabian Savitsky asked for a work that could be performed with the Miami State Orchestra that they finished the piece for actual performance. Verna Arvey describes their artistic approach. For Savitsky, we developed an idea that we had had long before and had tentatively begun. The music was Billy's, the text mine, and the plot our own. We wrote about ordinary people with a reasonable problem, people who live in the America of today, who love each other, and who share the aspirations of most American families. It was a simple plot, but a dramatic one. It exemplified our feeling that the most direct approach is usually the best, whatever one does. We called it Highway 1, USA. This presentation will look at the opera and its characters through the lens of what is known about Still and Arvey's personal experiences. Highway 1 USA is about family and the paradox of love, jealousy, ambition, greed, loyalty, manipulation. These opposing forces were experienced by William Grant Still in his own family history and his two very different marriages. Verna Arvey, his second wife and librettist, was both a journalist and a musician, a concert pianist who premiered some of Still's compositions. This was a long and happy marriage of soulmates. The one-act opera takes place in the kitchen of the small home of Mary and Bob. They run a gas station on Highway 1, which runs down the entire east coast of the USA. Bob had promised his dying mother that he would take care of his younger brother, Nate, and see to it that he got a good education in order to make something of himself. Nate, however, does not appreciate the sacrifices that Bob and Mary have made for him, and instead holds himself superior to them because of his education, even though he refuses to find work after graduating and continues to lean on Bob and Mary for support. In the end, he tries to seduce Mary, and when she refuses him, he stabs her. Not wanting to take responsibility, he begs Bob to take the blame, and because he thinks Mary is dead, Bob does take the blame. When she regains consciousness, she tells what really happened. Nate tries to escape, Bob and Mary declare their love, and the opera ends with a deeper understanding between them. This study looks at the opera through the lens of the Still-Arvey families. Thanks to the work of Judith Ann Still, their daughter, the writings of both Still and Arvey are available through the William Grant Still Music Company. Verna Arvey describes their family background this way. Our story actually began in Ireland, Scotland, Spain, Africa, among several American Indian tribes, and in old Russia's Zhytomyr and Minsk. All those colorful places from which our forebears emigrated before mingling their bloods so that we could be born truly American. Still and Arvey were avid American patriots and believed that their art could bring about greater understanding among the various racial and ethnic groups making up the American culture. Still put it this way, we all rise together or not at all. Let's get into the opera. The one-act opera is divided into two scenes. Mary is in the kitchen packing a lunch for Bob and singing, Mr. Fox, he went a-stalking on a summer sunny day. Mr. Rabbit, he came walking, and he met Sly Fox halfway. Mr. Fox told Mr. Rabbit all the news from round the town. Mr. Fox told Mr. Rabbit all the news from round the town. He said it was his habit to have a snack at sundown. This song sounds like a folk song, but is an original melody. It is in the African-American story tradition of Brer Rabbit. Singing in the kitchen goes back to Still's childhood in Little Rock, Arkansas, where he lived with his mother, aunt, and grandma. Let's listen to this delightful song. You will find the text to each recording on the right side of the slide. Still's father, William Grant Still Sr., had died under mysterious circumstances in Woodville, Mississippi, just a couple of months after Still Jr.'s birth in 1895. Knowing it was not safe for them as educated Black people in a small Mississippi town, his mother decided to move to Little Rock to be with her family. His grandma, Ann Fambro, would sing hymns and spirituals while cooking, and young Still loved to listen and snack on whatever she was making. Carrie Lena Fambro Still Shepperson, Still's mother, was a high school English teacher in Little Rock. She was also a lover of Shakespeare, a playwright, a musician, and an active leader in her community. When Still was 9, his mother married Charles Shepperson. Shepperson was a music and theater lover, and in 1912, provided the home with a phonograph and Red Seal recordings of opera. Still fell in love with the sounds of Puccini and Verdi and decided very early that he wanted to compose operas. His mother had great expectations of William and wanted him to become a doctor, not a musician. She was well aware of the lack of opportunity for an African-American musician in the world of classical music at the time. Still was reading by the time he was 4 and was creating all kinds of toys, even instruments, especially violins, when he was very young. He carried these skills on into adulthood when he became a parent himself. By the time his mother passed away, she was able to acknowledge that he was on the right path for his own life. Bob recalls his mother's last wish and his promise. She had her dream of a son with learning, a child who would send our name forth over all this world, whose words would command respect, whose deeds would win wide acclaim. Her life had no other meaning. In her mind, that prayer lingered constantly. She had her dream of a son with great knowledge. When she passed away, she called me to her side and made me promise to help Nate make his way in the world, to serve his keen brain with my brawn. He had a dream of a son with learning, a child who would send knowledge forth over all the world, whose words would command respect, whose deeds would win by the flame. Her life had no meaning. In her mind, that prayer lingered constantly. Still had experienced Nate's brand of selfishness in his own life with his first wife. Still discovered at the age of 21 that his own father, although only 24 when he died, had put aside money for his education. This allowed him to attend music classes at Oberlin. By this time, though, he had married Grace Bundy, a girl he had met at Wilberforce, but who he barely knew. They had left school just before graduation, having broken one of the school rules about walking off campus with someone of the opposite sex. Out of a sense of honor, Still had married her, but she didn't want to live with him for the first several years of their marriage. When he moved to New York, she joined him and ended up spending most of his money living above their means. She was evidently very jealous of his artistic successes and was often in competition with him. She ended up leaving him and taking their 4 children to Canada in 1932. She successfully turned them against him, but he continued to support them until they each reached adulthood. The loyalty and close relationship of Bob and Mary reflects the life that Still and Arvie had together once they married in 1939. In their writings about their life together, there are many references to their simple way of life. Money was always spare, but they had a home, food, and the ability to do their life's work as artists. Bob and Mary sing about their love, but also describe the sacrifices they have made in order to put Nate through college.
gave to my heart a reason for beating until the day you burst on my bleak horizon. I never had thought that life was worth living. I wondered how you could love me when I had so little to offer. I dared not dream you would share my work and home. So plain and unpretentious, so dread, so black and void. Brought romance to this dwelling. Your beauty made it whole. Your spirit transformed. You made me know that life has a deeper meaning. You gave me the will to start anew every day. You meant more to me.
In Highway 1 USA, the chorus of church members describes Bob and Mary. They're our neighbors and friends. We wish for none better. They follow the Spirit of the Lord to the letter. Their doors always open. They welcome all who enter. Their hearts are honest. They never were pretenders. They're loyal, too. Cares are swept away when they're around. Troubles never stay when they're around. When our friends are near.
We wish for none better. We follow the Spirit of the Lord to the heaven. With doors always open, we welcome all who enter. Their hearts are honest, they never were pretenders. There's a certain way troubles never stay.
In real life, the Stills describe themselves as spiritual. Harvey relates the following event from Still's early years after he had married Grace, but still was living alone. One day alone in Columbus, he began to feel that he was meant to use whatever talent God had given him in his service. He dedicated himself to that end. It was a promise never to be forgotten. It has been felt in everything he has written in some form since that day. Bob and the church group leave to go see Nate graduate and bring him home. Mary's neighbor and old friend, Aunt Lou, has come to help run the station while Bob is gone. Aunt Lou sings of how she lost her own child and how Mary had reminded her of her own child so much that Lou had taken Mary on as her own. Still loved children and wrote a lot of music centered around a child and the mother-child relationship. Even his suite for violin and piano contains a movement subtitled Mother and Child.
told me your secrets. My cherished hand, my cherished
The scene ends with Aunt Lou and Mary in duet. Mary vents to Aunt Lou about how she is afraid that Nate will take Bob away from her and how much she hates him. Still uses more dissonance in this scene than has been used up to this point. Aunt Lou suggests that there may be a way to solve the problem of Nate. The scene closes with Mary sobbing and Aunt Lou trying to console her. Scene 2 takes place a year later. Bob and Mary are alone in the kitchen, and after a bit of sarcastic banter at Nate's expense, Bob sings of his disillusion over Nate. The music of this aria is an example of the Still Arby aesthetic, spare, direct language, music that changes easily to express the emotion behind the words. The final line does not cadence, but rather leaves one suspended because the text leaves room for Bob to continue to support Nate.
I called him Nate when he was a boy. I'll call him Nate when he's a man. Man he is. A dream wasted, a sacrifice in vain. His loss to give a boy his chance. Our hope shattered, our work all unrepaid. Our days spent and nothing gained. Ingratitude has crowned our efforts. Things lost now will never be regained in this world. Believe me, it hurts when I see him sleeping all day. It angers me when my wife waits on him like a slave. Believe me, he does not deserve such kindly treatment. He treats our friends like worthless morons. All way of living never fails to make him scornful. Forget so much. His modest life gave him everything, every advantage. In heaven, my mother must have seen how sadly we failed to carry out her wish. I hope she knows how steadily we toiled. I hope she knows how honestly we tried. I hope she knows how much I when I'm promised I'll try again.
Mary has decided to do something about Nate since he is still living with them, although he pays no rent, doesn't help with the station, and hasn't even looked for work. She pretends to coddle his selfish, egotistic attitude as he brags about how intelligent he is, how high above all the others he is, and how ignorant his brother Bob is. He even claims that Bob is incapable of having dreams of the future.
What does he know of dreams? How can he talk of success? The vagabond gives him his greatest thrill. Thinks well of the cash they bring, those mechanical sounds. They form the beginning, the middle, and the end of God's will. He knows not of worlds to connect, and yet he refuses to let. My brother has no thought for tomorrow, and yet he will not take the counsel to know. What does he know of dreams? How can he talk of success?
Mary sarcastically says to him, "Yes, indeed, little people they are. They are only warm-hearted, sincere, and wise in a homely way. They have no other virtues. All the virtues belong to you." Nate takes her seriously and believes she is flirting with him. He attempts to seduce her, and when she rejects him, calling him a fool, he stabs her. Mary screams and faints.
These men I have known intimately through their writings. Now you can see why the people here bore me.
They are only one-hearted, sincere and wise in a holy way. They have no other virtues. All the virtues belong to you.
You're wonderful, Mary. For days you've been on my mind. Your deep understanding, your sympathetic heart. Each glance thrown my way tantalized me. Your eyes spoke what your lips would not reveal. I sensed that you were tired of life with Bob. You're too Come with me, Mary. Come with me, Mary. I love you, and I know you love me. Let's not waste any more time. Let's go away together. Let's go away together. Forget what is not worth a second thought.
When Bob rushes in, he believes Mary is dead. Nate, still the irresponsible coward, begs Bob to do something to protect him. Bob takes the blame, although the sheriff and the neighbors don't believe him. Mary regains consciousness and recalls that Nate stabbed her. He tries to run, but the neighbors catch him and he is arrested. During this action, the chorus of neighbors is whispering a variety of reactions rather than singing, although the composer suggests that they try to pitch their speaking voices around B flat.
Mary, you're alive. Thanks God.
That's right, it must have done
Take me away. I kind of thought this was a case of mistaken identity. Help me, oh, help me. Don't let him hurt me. Don't let him hang me. Don't let me.
The opera closes with Bob and Mary singing a love duet. This music is very accessible, using a popular chord change that anyone growing up in the 50s and 60s will recognize. I'll save that for when you see the opera in person. During Still's composing years from 1920 to 1970, there was great discussion about whether there could be such a thing as an authentic American opera canon. Traditionalist opera managers in this country were devoted to the great Italian and German composers. American composers were fighting battles with each other over the various styles of composing and all of the experimental efforts with atonality and dissonance. There were cliques, and mostly the East Coast composers who had studied with Nadia Boulanger in France were the winners. With Still living in Los Angeles, he was isolated from these movers and shakers, but he still had a vision of creating a true American music that would reflect the thick stew of our culture. Highway 1 USA is about family and neighbors loving each other and helping each other. You could describe Opera Theater of St. Louis in that way too. From their beginnings, they reached out to the community to both educate and serve. Everyone, including staff, both year-round and seasonal, and volunteers, are made to feel that we are part of the OTSL family. When I returned to St. Louis in 1987, having taught and sung in Chicago and in Germany, my goal was to work with the company as a cooperating teacher. They were developing special programs for teachers at that time in order to get opera studies into the curriculum and broaden the potential for both future professionals and new audience members. Their attitude was to treat us as special people and provided workshops and retreats to deepen our knowledge and experience with the art form. In 1991, they made the decision to pilot Music Words Opera, a curriculum for K through 12 schools in the St. Louis Public Schools, and chose 5 schools in the city for that purpose. My school, Carlene Visual and Performing Arts Middle School, was one of them. Since that time, OTSL pioneered again in the St. Louis City schools the Artists in Training program for high school singers, which has produced a number of professional singers, Jermaine Smith, Julia Bullock, and Michaela Volz, to name just a few. This program was purposely aimed at the St. Louis Public Schools, recognizing the need to nurture and create opportunity for young Black and Brown singers. OTSL has also commissioned a number of operas by Black composers. This difficult year of COVID has made it very clear that institutional racism is a force that must be addressed in all parts of our culture. The opera world, and in particular opera theater, recognizes how great the need is for programs of equity, diversity, and inclusion. The OTSL 2021 festival season reflects this commitment by focusing on BIPOC communities in the following ways. Inclusive casting, the first annual Juneteenth concert, and a continuation of the center stage concerts featuring our young artists. Hiring on all levels, administrative, technical, production, casting, conducting, stage directing, and the Clayco Future Leaders Fellowship. Clayco Fellows this year are Leanne Alvarado, Chandler Johnson, and Quentin Beverly. They are in administration, advancement, and artistic aspects of the company. The Voices Fund, a path for empathy, dialogue, and change, includes a joint concert with 9 PBS on November 23rd, 2020, which featured Angel Riley, Christopher Humbert Jr., and Ganson Salmon. The holiday concert and Opera on the Go video of Pirates of Penzance, featuring Angel Riley, Ben Taylor, Ryan Johnson, Stephanie Sanchez, Alex Rosen, and accompanied by Mauro Ronco. And most recently, the symposium in collaboration with Washington University entitled Belonging in Opera, Learning from Our Past, Engaging with Our Future. Moderator Dr. Naomi Andre led the discussions on April 6th with the Roundtable of Administrators Afton Battle from Fort Worth, Chloe Johnson from Dallas, and Marshall Wells from the Metropolitan Opera. And with a panel of scholars, Dr. Louise Toppin, University of Michigan, who you've been listening to on the recordings of Highway 1 USA, Dr. Marsha Porter from Florida State University, and Dr. Todd Decker from Washington U. And on April 13th, singers speak with Nicole Cabon, Brianna Elise Hunter, Will Lieberman, and Morris Robinson. Historians Dr. Maya Gibson from the University of Missouri at Columbia, and Dr. Lauren Eldridge Stewart. And from pen to stage, composers Anthony Davis and Damian Sneed. This enlightening and inspiring symposium is available on YouTube, and I encourage you to watch. And finally, New Works, Bold Voices, composers Stephen Mackey, Damian Sneed, and Laura Cartman were commissioned to each write a 20-minute piece to be filmed in the Opera Theater of St. Louis COVID-induced film studio, but were moved to the regular festival season when a winter-spring surge in cases closed down the filming. New Works, Bold Voices continues to be a model for supporting new opera composition. It is a pleasure to be able to represent Opera Theater of St. Louis and its quest to expand its family of administrators, artists, volunteers, and audience. In closing, I quote William Grant Still's friend, conductor Leopold Stokowski. In my opinion, William Grant Still is one of America's great citizens because his musical nature has given him the power to fuse into one unified expression our American music of today with the ancestral memories lying deep within him of African music. This blending into one stream of diverse racial cultural origins is most important to the future of our country. For the reason that we Americans come from so many racial origins, we must find a way to harmonize them into one. In our cultural and economic existence, and in our conception of what is the good life that we all can share. Still has succeeded in this to a remarkable degree, and this is what gives deep significance to his life and musical creation.
That was great. Thank you so much, Diane.
Looks like we lost Janet.
That was quite the teaser that you had there at the end of the opera. I'm very intrigued.
Oh, good, good, excellent. So do you know how early we may have lost her?